Well, we're back, everybody, and we're here to talk about the Season of Blood a little bit. So, Season of Malignance, the first, I don't even know if you can call it season, but thing that they did is ending on the 17th, and also the Season of Blood, Season 2, is coming out on October 17th. So before I get into this, I feel like Diablo 4 is kind of like a toxic X. You try to get them out of your system and cleanse yourself, but you keep going back to the news and reading, hoping that they change because the sex was crazy. Which is, in this case, the sex is the one levels 1 through 50, right? So it was really fun, levels 1 through 50, and then after, you realize that she wants to stab you. So, with Season of Blood, there was a lot of changes announced, and I don't want to say excited about them, but I am happy that they did them. I'm trying to be as impartial as possible and remove all my Blizzard bias out of the bloodstream. So basically, the seasonal mechanic, the thing that they introduced, like one of the big things for the season, is the vampiric power tree. So that's kind of what you're looking at on your screen here. It kind of reminds me of like a large cluster jewel type tree inside of the PoE tree a little bit. And you can socket these different vampiric powers that, can change your abilities and gameplay. I'm not going to go into each and every single one of the powers. There's tons of videos that do that, but it's a good system. It's simplified for sure, which is totally fine. But it adds that layer of depth that I think people are looking for. It's a start for where people are looking for, right? Basically, you have to collect this like potent blood, which you get from fallen enemies and hell tides recolored, seasonal quests, and different blood harvest events. I think the only criticism I have of this is that this kind of stuff is great, but it's always removed in the season after. So we're left with like this empty hole of content and we're just constantly trying to fill this void that keeps opening up. So I hope they like consider that and think of that when moving into adding additional content into the game, because adding stuff like that is great for the season, but none of it ever compounds, or there's no system or thing to do in the game that rolls over into the next season, because that's how you build content, in these ARPG type games. And there's always the argument where you could have content overload, where you basically have so much going on that it fully confuses the player or blows the balance out of proportion and it's impossible to balance. And that is definitely a worry. But with a game that's so bare bones already, I don't see that being is a problem for at least a few seasons of mashing some of these mechanics together in the future. I will actually give them big props, and I'm so happy they did this. And this is the one reason I'm actually returning to Diablo 4 for Season 2 and to try it out and check this stuff out, is because they removed the renown grind. I think I can get a resounding hell yes that this was an absolute terrible thing to do to the player. It was this meaningless, repeatable grind, and the only reason it was there was to increase the time metric that the player actually played the game. So basically what you see on your screen here is earned skill points, potion capacity, max obols, paragon points earned from renown will persist between each character. Renown, experience, and gold must be earned on each character. I don't give a shit about the experience and gold. It is what it is. But they forced you to do these renown grinds to actually get the paragon points, get the skill points, get the obol capacity, the potion capacity, and what you really want is the paragon and skill points, because without it, it's like you're playing at a disadvantage, especially when like every skill point is like 10% damage in a skill, depending on where you use that point. So it was a massive grind, massive headache, and it really, I believe, shut down a lot of players in season 1 and just the game in general, because I don't even think it was the level grind. Leveling to 100 is whatever, but who wants to go around finding altars of Lilith every single time? Doing it once was the most brain numbing experience of my life. When I had to try to do it again, I couldn't even I couldn't bring myself to do it. It felt like absolute torture to do this activity, and a game shouldn't feel like that. So if this was a big deal for you like it was for me, I think it would be worth your time to go back and check out Diablo 4, even if it is just making one character, doing a playthrough, and calling it quits after that, because this added so much anti-fun to my game that it felt like a halo hovering over my head, knowing that I had to do it. And I couldn't even finish a character in season 1 because I knew I was going to have to do it and knew I was going to have to progress through the renown system. And I don't mind grinding. I like ARPGs. I love grinding. But this felt like grinding for the sole purpose of keeping you on the game, not for something rewarding. Like, it felt just like a meaningless grind that could be corrected with a button click, you know? So something else that they did in this update, which I'm very happy about, is the elemental resistances. For anybody that doesn't know, before in Diablo 4, armor was undeniably unfallible in its ability to be the best defensive stat in the entire game. So the reason for that is essentially every point of armor contributed to your elemental resistances as well. So your armor stat also improved your elemental resists across the board. This was to simplify it for the casual player, which I've discussed in a video. The casual player is a totally type of different person, but the elemental resistances would all contribute to this armor stat, and it made it basically brain dead gameplay to where you could just get an armor gem inside of your rings and your amulet or whatever and just stack as much armor as possible, and then you'd basically have all the elemental resistances you need. With Season of Blood, they did update that to where armor does not contribute to elemental resistances, which makes absolutely more sense than the alternative. So when you get 20% or 9% all resist or something like that, it actually gives you those resistances in your player, UI. So that way it actually affects elemental resistances, actually means something this time around, which is very important to, having a healthy ecosystem of stats making sense just in general, right? This is a pretty girthy paragraph, so I'm not going to go through it bar by bar, but they did make it still a little bit easy just for you to hit those resistance values, which is absolutely okay in my opinion. Diablo 4 is once again supposed to be a simplified game at its core, compared to the other competitors out there. So they're basically, adding more ways to get all resist. They're, adding resistances to pants. One of the things that they did do, though, is lower the amount of resistance you get from intelligence. So it gives 0.025% now per one intelligence instead of 0.05. So it's a 50% nerf, essentially. So I think this is going to actually help sorceresses a lot, because a big problem with sorceress was that, you had this intelligence, and you're supposed to think in your head, right, logically, oh my god, she's going to be broken. You get so much all resist from your one stat, when resistances were absolutely awful. So they had to do this nerf just to compensate for the other classes, because sorceress would be tanky MFers if this went through and they didn't nerf it. They would have intelligent stacking plus all the other gear changes to elemental damage. They would be absolutely capped to the max very quickly. So just a heads up on that. I still think sorceress would be a good option going into this, just because they will be more tanky now, but they did have to compensate, nerf this just for the sorceress class as well, and I totally understand that. And the last reason I'm going to come back and check out the game just to do a playthrough on a character is for the highlighted reason you see on your screen. Builds that utilize crit damage and vulnerable damage have been disproportionately powerful. Oh my god, they played the fucking game. Can you believe it? For anybody that doesn't know, you do know if you've played Diablo 4, Crit damage and vuln damage were, bar none, the way to kill things. There was no other option. Try doing a poison build when you start getting up to the higher tiers of dungeons, higher tiers of, doing content. That falls off so dramatically compared to vulnerable damage and crit damage in the current game that it felt almost unfair watching it. And then you see this Bone Spear Necro come out of nowhere with his crit damage and vuln damage, one-shotting world bosses, one-shotting everything in sight. Obviously, Bone Spear is a little bit of a outlier, but you get the point. Every build revolved around trying to get as much vulnerable damage and crit damage available at the time. So essentially what they're doing is redistributing the power buckets and the damage buckets available to allow for other class builds to be able to surface, because they're not trying to nerf everything with this. They're not trying to remove all the fun, vulnerable, and crit damage builds that are out there, but also allow for some other builds to be competitive. So they basically rewired this monster scaling and then redid how the damage buckets are calculated, so that way everything is more fair across the board, which I am 100% on board with. There's some stuff you want to try, but you can't do it because you can't find a way to do vulnerable inside that build, or can't get crit damage inside that build, whatever the case is. And this basically allows for those builds that don't use those two modifiers, explicitly to surface to the top and, compete with the other builds. Look, and before everybody goes rushing towards the comments basically saying like, you're a freaking idiot, I'm never downloading that piece of shit game again, your rage is justified. I really want to say that. I think you being upset is completely justified with this. You paid $70 and you got an incomplete game. I'm upset too. And I'm not saying this even fixes all the problems. This probably doesn't even fix like half of the problems in the game, right? But it's a step in the right direction. And that's really the whole point of this, and that's why I am trying to be fair and impartial, just because I do appreciate when effort is actually put in, and this was a big patch, and you can tell some clear effort was put into trying to do something to show goodwill to the public, right? So personally, I will be playing Season 2, Season of Blood. I'm going to run up one of the Druids. I haven't played the Druid class yet, actually, and I think it'd be kind of cool to play it. Something they did on stream is basically you could have Boulder going inside of your Hurricane, so I might try that out and see how it goes. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. I don't know. I mean, it's something to do, right? Kill some time if you have available time gaming, or some open areas that you can fit a character playthrough on. I know most of you, like I said, it's like an abusive ex. You just can't stop watching the news. It's like you just keep coming back, just hoping that she fixed herself and hoping she's better. And I know she's not better, right? I know this is not entirely fixed. I know we still got a ways to go, but I am man enough to acknowledge that this is a step in the right direction, and I am happy about it. So hopefully we see more stuff like this. Let me know in the comments what you guys think. Like, comment, subscribe. I appreciate you.